My dad froze every account I had, called me crazy after I returned from deployment, and quietly put my own house up for sale. When he pushed the transfer papers across the table and told me to sign, my sister laughed like everything already belonged to her. What none of them knew was what I had hidden beneath that table. The first vibration came just after 5 in the morning. My phone trembled against my thigh, stopped. Outside the car, Norfolk was dark. Mist clung to the windshield. I sat 2 houses down from my parents' place, wearing a dark coat over my Navy uniform, watching 3 unmarked vehicles settle along the curb. My father had called 41 times, then 49. By the time the first federal agent stepped onto his lawn, the number had reached 57. The messages changed as the calls piled up. "Call me. You don't understand what you've done. We're still your family." I read every line. I answered none of them. 4 people in plain jackets moved toward the front steps. Another spoke quietly into a radio. There were no sirens, no shouting, only car doors closing, shoes scraping concrete, and my phone vibrating again. One of the agents knocked. The sound carried through the quiet street. Once, then again. A light came on inside my parents' house, but the morning my father finally started begging me didn't begin at his front door. It began 3 weeks earlier, with a cup of coffee I couldn't pay for. I had returned to Norfolk after 8 months at sea. The engines had hummed through the deck beneath my feet. The ship smelled of metal, fuel, salt, and recycled air. Sleep came in short pieces. Even when everything was quiet, some part of me remained awake. When I came home, I did not want a ceremony. I wanted black coffee. I wanted one quiet morning. Most of all, I wanted to unlock my own front door and feel that my life had waited for me. The coffee shop on base was nearly empty. I ordered the smallest black coffee on the menu, $4.50. The cashier handed me the card reader, and I tapped my personal debit card against it. The machine gave a short beep, declined. I tried again. Another beep, declined. The young sailor behind me noticed my rank, then politely looked away. He was trying to spare me embarrassment. Somehow, that kindness made it worse. I had made decisions at sea that affected hundreds of people. Yet there I was, unable to pay for a cup of coffee that cost less than $5. I stepped outside before anyone could offer to cover it. The wind off the water cut through my clothes. I called the bank. After 2 attempts, the system told me the phone number connected to my account did not match mine. That was when embarrassment gave way to something colder. My father held a temporary financial power of attorney. I had arranged it before deployment in case a bill or emergency needed attention while I was unreachable. I had trusted him because he was my father. He answered on the 3rd ring. His voice was calm. Too calm. He told me they had frozen my accounts because I had returned unstable. Then he said they were selling my house before I did something reckless. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood him. Then I heard my sister laugh in the background. She said maybe now I would learn to ask before spending money. Not their money, mine. I asked my father one question. "You froze my money and listed my house without speaking to me?" He answered in the patient tone adults use with children. "You're not thinking clearly. Let us handle this." My first instinct was to demand names, dates, and explanations. I wanted to remind him that I had crossed an ocean to come home, not to ask permission to live in my own house. Then I heard what he was waiting for. Anger. If I raised my voice, he could call it instability. If I threatened to come over, he could call it aggression. He had already chosen the story he wanted to tell about me. All he needed was a reaction that fit inside it, so I gave him 2 words, "I understand." The silence on the line changed. He thought I had surrendered. I had not. People think financial abuse begins when someone takes your money. It usually begins earlier, when they convince themselves they are entitled to make decisions for you. I ended the call and drove back to my quarters. Inside, I opened the garment bag in the closet. The metal hook clicked against the rod. I put on my uniform slowly. The belt buckle snapped into place. I adjusted the collar and looked at the insignia in the mirror. The uniform did not make me stronger. It reminded me not to let panic write the next move. It also reminded me that no one, not even my own family, had the right to rewrite the truth for me. I took the original power of attorney from my document case and drove to the Navy Legal Assistance Office. I didn't know yet how far they had gone. I only knew that if my family wanted to call me crazy, they were going to have to say it where the truth could hear them. The attorney behind the desk expected a family misunderstanding. Then he placed my signature under a magnifying lamp and stopped breathing for a second. The attorney behind the desk expected a family misunderstanding. Then he placed my signature under a magnifying lamp and stopped breathing for a second. He moved the paper closer to the light and asked where I had signed it. At my kitchen table, before deployment, he asked who had been present. My father. Then he asked whether I had approved an extension after leaving port. No. I answered each question like a report at sea. Time, place, witness, sequence. Facts were easier to hold than feelings. He tapped the signature with his pen. The lines were too even. The pressure did not change where my hand normally changed direction. It looked less like something written and more like something copied. Then he pointed to the date beside the notary seal. On that day, I had been thousands of miles from Virginia. The paper claimed I had signed it in person. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Only the soft movement of paper filled the room. He made one call, then took me to the credit union on base. The fraud specialist met us in a small office. He typed while my financial life appeared across his screen. My phone number had been replaced. My mailing address had been changed to my parents' house. 2 transfers, worth about $38,000, had gone into my sister's account. Another request was pending. Someone had applied to borrow more than $200,000 against the value of my home. The specialist said my father had presented the power of attorney and claimed I could not be reached because I was receiving treatment. I saw my name everywhere. Nothing else felt like mine. The phone number was not mine. The address was not mine. The person receiving my money was not someone I had chosen. They had not emptied my life in one dramatic theft. They had replaced me one line at a time. The attorney from JAG explained that the House and any attempt to control my legal decisions required a civilian attorney with experience in guardianship and property law. By early afternoon, Maya Collins was sitting across from me with a laptop open. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. Then they stopped. She had found an emergency guardianship petition. My parents had submitted sworn statements claiming I had returned from deployment angry, paranoid, and unable to manage money. Attached was a letter from a counselor I could not remember meeting. The letter said I was suffering from severe trauma and complicated grief. It asked the court to let my family protect my assets before I spent or destroyed them. Maya opened the property records. A real estate company had already been contacted. A listing appointment had been scheduled. The proposed sale date was 12 days away. She said the date softly. 12 days. My house was not large. It sat near the water in a quiet neighborhood where the hallway floor creaked outside the bedroom. There was still a dent in the door frame from the day Michael tried to carry a dresser inside by himself. His coffee mug remained in the cabinet. His folded flag rested above the fireplace. I bought that house after he died, using money I had once wished the government would never need to send me. Every room held something ordinary from our life together: a repaired chair, a loose cabinet hinge, a mark on the wall from a holiday visit. My parents were not simply planning to sell property, they were turning my husband's death into startup money for my sister. I stood so quickly that the chair legs scraped against the floor. I reached for my phone. The JAG attorney raised one hand. Right now, anger is the one piece of evidence they still need. He explained that my parents had already described me as volatile and confused. One angry call could be recorded. One visit to their house could be shown without context. Even a reasonable reaction could become proof of the story they had built. The cruelest part of being falsely called unstable is that every normal reaction begins to look like evidence. Anger becomes aggression, grief becomes incapacity, silence becomes confusion. On a ship, authority is visible. Rank is clear. Inside a family, control can hide behind words like concern, protection, and love. I sat down again. The truth was not enough. It had to be documented in a form no one could twist. The attorney recommended an independent mental health evaluation before we challenged the petition. My stomach tightened. So I have to prove I'm not crazy? Maya closed her laptop. You're not proving your worth, she said. You're removing the weapon they built. I hated that the process was necessary. I hated even more that refusing it would help them. So I agreed. The next morning, I walked into a mental health clinic, not because they were right about me, but because I was done letting them turn help into an accusation. I expected the evaluation to feel like another interrogation. Instead, one question from the doctor exposed the difference between being wounded and being incapable. I expected the evaluation to feel like another interrogation. Instead, one question from the doctor exposed the difference between being wounded and being incapable. The office was plain. A window looked over the parking lot. A tired plant sat beside a pot of coffee that had clearly been there too long. The doctor did not wear a white coat. She sat across from me with a legal pad and spoke to me like an adult. What do you believe your family wants from you? My money. She waited. And what do you fear they can take that money represents? I looked toward the window. A delivery truck was backing into a space below us, its warning signal repeating in a slow rhythm. For several seconds, I could not answer. Then I said, my right to decide what happens to me. That was the first honest thing I had said that morning. I told her about waking in the dark because I thought I heard an alarm from the ship. I told her there were days when I stood outside my bedroom and could not walk in because that room still belonged to a life Michael and I once shared. I admitted that I hated pity. I admitted that I controlled my emotions so tightly that people often mistook calm for emptiness. I also admitted that part of me feared every word would end up in a file my parents could use against me. The doctor listened. Then she said, grief is not incompetence. Anxiety is not incompetence. Getting help is not surrendering your legal identity. The sentence irritated me before it comforted me. I had spent years believing strength meant giving pain no name. That morning, I learned unnamed pain is exactly what other people get to define for you. The evaluation continued for more than an hour. She asked about my accounts, my mortgage, my pension, and the choices I had made before deployment. She asked what would happen if I signed the papers my family had prepared. I understood every question. I understood the consequences behind each answer. By the end, she concluded that I could manage my finances, recognize risk, and make decisions about my own care. There was no evidence that I had lost the ability to direct my life. The relief was real, but I could not let my family know about the report yet. That afternoon, I sat with Nathan and Maya in a small conference room. The bank had added stronger identity checks to my accounts. Maya was preparing to revoke the power of attorney and block the sale of my house, but she did not want the filings served too soon. If my parents believed they still controlled the situation, they might keep talking. Nathan told me not to argue with them about my mental health. I was to save every request for money, every document they asked me to sign, and every message about the house. They need you emotional, he said. Give them tired. Maya closed the folder. They need you confused. Give them quiet. I understood the logic. I still hated it. On a ship, danger was direct. Alarms sounded, people moved, and the problem had a name. This plan required me to let my parents lie inside my own home. It required me to watch my sister spend money that did not belong to her. Worst of all, it required me to accept their fake concern without tearing it apart. I asked whether letting them continue made me part of what they were doing. Maya answered without hesitation. No, it makes you a witness. That distinction stayed with me on the drive home. I was not giving permission. I was gathering proof. Inside, I placed my uniform back in the closet. The metal hanger tapped against the rod. Then I chose an old sweater, worn pants, and shoes I used for yard work. I left my hair loose. I turned off several lights. Important documents went into a safe. I checked the cameras in the common rooms. Then I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. I practiced looking away before holding eye contact too long. I let my sentences trail into uncertainty. I waited before answering questions, even when I knew the truth. The woman in the mirror looked smaller. That was the point. The doorbell rang just after 6. I checked the camera. My mother stood on the porch holding a container of food. My father carried a leather case. My sister stood beside them, staring at her phone. I lowered my shoulders before opening the door. For the first time in my life, I was about to use weakness as camouflage. Before I tell you what happened when I opened that door, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I always want to know how far these stories travel. My mother hugged me first. My father studied the room. My sister looked past me toward everything she thought would soon belong to her. My mother hugged me first. My father studied the room. My sister looked past me toward everything she thought would soon belong to her. "You look exhausted, sweetheart," my mother said. She held me a little too long, as if tenderness could become evidence. Then she carried the food into the kitchen and placed the container on the counter with a soft plastic thud. My father did not hug me. His eyes moved from the windows to the floor, then to the fireplace and the staircase. He was not looking at a home. He was measuring an asset. Lauren barely looked up from her phone. "What's the Wi-Fi password?" I gave it to her. Over the next few days, their visits became routine. My mother filled the refrigerator, then sorted through the mail beside it. My father spoke about protecting the home equity before the market shifted. Lauren suggested changing the locks because I had been forgetful since coming home. They asked whether I was sleeping, whether I was taking medication, whether I ever heard sounds that were not there. The questions wore the shape of concern, but each one felt prepared. I answered carefully. I said I was tired. I said I was adjusting. I gave them nothing that could be cut apart and rebuilt into the story they wanted. Real concern asks what you need. Control tells you what you are, then uses your answer as proof. A few days later, I decided to test them. I mentioned that the brakes on my car needed work. The repair would cost about $700, and I asked whether I could use money from my own account. Lauren answered first. "You shouldn't be driving until we know you're stable." She said the money would be better used for marketing. When I asked what she was marketing, she described a home styling service connected to an online store. The explanation had plenty of words and almost no details. My parents agreed that her project was a wiser use of the money. I lowered my eyes and let the subject disappear. The act worked too well. After several days, I caught myself walking with my shoulders bent, even when no one else was in the room. I stopped looking in mirrors. Pretending to be helpless had begun to follow me after the performance ended. I called Helen Grant, a retired admiral who had known me long enough to hear what I was not saying. I told her I was observing them. She was quiet for a moment. When did observation become agreement? It didn't. Then stand up when they leave. After the call, I stood in the center of my living room and pulled my shoulders back. I breathed until the room felt like mine again. The next afternoon, my phone gave a sharp notification while I was parked on base. Motion detected. I opened the camera feed. Lauren stepped through my front door, using a key my mother had kept. Another woman followed, carrying a tape measure, color samples, and a camera. They moved a chair away from the window. They photographed the fireplace. They talked about removing personal items before the listing photographs. Then Lauren pointed toward the folded flag above the mantel. The woman asked whether it needed to stay. Lauren lifted it with one hand. Near the garage door sat an open cardboard box marked "Donate." She lowered the flag into it and said, "Buyers don't need all this military stuff in the photos." I sat still in my car. The sounds around me faded. An engine started nearby. None of it reached me clearly. I remembered the 2 officers who brought that flag to my house. I remembered its weight when they placed it in my hands. I remembered holding it carefully because letting it touch the ground felt impossible. A realtor sees square footage. A grieving spouse sees where the last ordinary morning happened. I wanted to call Lauren. Instead, I downloaded the recording. I saved 3 copies and sent one to Maya. Add it to the file. That was all I wrote. Until then, some part of me had believed my family might stop if they understood how much they were hurting me. Watching that flag disappear into a donation box ended that hope. When I returned home, the box was still in the garage. The flag had been placed back above the fireplace, but it sat at the wrong angle. They assumed I would not notice. I adjusted it with both hands. A business card slipped from beneath the wooden frame and landed against the stone. It belonged to a real estate company. On the back was a handwritten date for the listing photographs. 5 days away. They were not preparing to sell my house anymore. They were already staging the life they planned to erase. The next person to tell me what my family had planned wasn't a lawyer, a banker, or an agent. It was my niece. The next person to tell me what my family had planned was not a lawyer, a banker, or an agent. It was my niece. Lauren dropped her off the following morning because she had an appointment. My niece sat at the kitchen table with a sheet of drawing paper and a box of colored pencils. She was sketching a Navy ship, but every few seconds she erased the same section of the hull. I asked what was wrong. The pencil stopped moving. "Grandma said you're going away for treatment. Are they going to lock you up?" I kept my face still, not because the question did not hurt, but because I did not want my pain to become hers. I asked who had told her that. She said my mother had told everyone I was no longer myself. Lauren had explained that the house would be sold because I could not live alone. They had also warned her not to ask me too many questions because it might upset me. I walked around the table and knelt beside her chair. "Getting help is never something to be ashamed of," I said, "but nobody gets to lie about you to take away your choices." I told her she did not have to choose sides. None of this was her fault. Then I changed the subject and asked about the ship she was drawing. Children do not understand legal strategy. They understand who makes the room feel safe. Until that morning, I had treated the situation as a financial fight between adults. Now I could see the story spreading into the next generation. I was dangerous. Lauren needed to be rescued. My parents were the heroes making difficult decisions. What adults call a private family matter often becomes a child's first lesson about power. If I stayed silent forever, my niece might grow up believing that control was simply what love looked like when adults claimed to know best. My mother arrived that afternoon carrying a glossy folder. She placed it on the kitchen table and slid it toward me. The program itself looked ordinary. It offered counseling, quiet rooms, outdoor space, and temporary residential care. There was nothing shameful about any of that. The problem was the paperwork. My mother had scheduled an evaluation without asking me. She and my father were listed as the people authorized to make decisions. A release form would allow the program to share information with them. The proposed stay began the same week they planned to sell my house. My mother tapped one section with her fingernail. "It's only for a little while," she said. "When you're stronger, we'll explain where the money went." The papers made a soft scraping sound as I pulled them closer. When I was stronger, we would explain. She had just admitted they knew I had not been told. I let my voice shake. "Would you take care of the house?" "Of course." The answer came before I had finished the question. "And Lauren?" My mother looked almost relieved. "She has children. She needs stability." That was when I understood she had already divided my life in her mind. My house was not mine to her. It was unused family property waiting to be reassigned to the person she considered more deserving. The signs had been there for years. My mother always wanted to know how much my benefits were worth. My father once suggested putting his name on an investment account so he could help manage it. Lauren used to joke that I had no children, so who was I saving for? After Michael died, my family asked about the benefits before they asked whether I was sleeping. I had called it awkwardness. I had called it concern. I had called it family. Warning signs rarely arrive wearing masks. Most of them arrive as jokes you are expected to forgive. After my mother left, I called Maya. The sale was 4 days away. The investigators still needed clear confirmation of the plan, where the money would go, whether my family knew I had not agreed, and how deeply Lauren was involved. I suggested dinner. Then I sent one message to my parents and sister. I'm ready to do what's best for the family. My father answered in less than a minute. He told me to dress presentably because someone would be coming to help with the documents. I watched the kitchen clock while I waited, then called him. Who is coming? Just someone who can make your decision official. After the call, I looked at the dining table where we had once shared Thanksgiving dinner. I began pulling out chairs and deciding where each person would sit. The wood legs dragged softly across the floor. They thought they were coming to collect my signature. I was inviting them to bring the entire conspiracy into one room. By Saturday evening, my dining room looked warm, ordinary, and safe. That was exactly why they never saw the trap. By Saturday evening, my dining room looked warm, ordinary, and safe. That was exactly why they never saw the trap. I cooked roast chicken and vegetables. The table was our old Thanksgiving table. Michael's folded flag rested above the fireplace, exactly where it belonged. Beneath that ordinary scene, everything had been prepared. Copies of the records were stored outside the house. A second phone sat charged in a drawer. The small communication device Maya had approved rested beneath my sweater. We had agreed on one sentence that would tell the people listening outside we had enough. I wore dark pants and a plain blouse, no uniform. Nothing that might disturb the story they had built about me. My father arrived carrying the leather case I had seen on the porch. My mother brought wine and walked into the kitchen as though she were hosting. Lauren wore fresh makeup and kept checking her phone. The fourth guest was a business acquaintance of my father's. He was a notary, and he looked uncomfortable. He said he was only there to witness a voluntary decision. "You've already seen the documents?" I asked. He said my father had explained the situation. It was not an answer. After dinner, my father opened the case. The lock snapped sharply in the quiet room. He placed the documents in front of me. One approved my admission to the residential program. Another gave my parents control over my finances during my stay. Beneath those was permission to sell the house. The final page divided the expected proceeds. Part would repay the new loan. Another would enter a family management account. A large portion had been assigned to Lauren's business. What remained for my care was smaller than the amount set aside for her office, equipment, and marketing. "Why is Lauren included?" I asked. "Because she has children and responsibilities." "And I don't?" My mother answered. "You have a career. You'll recover." Ice shifted inside her glass. In my family, fairness had never meant everyone carrying their own weight. It meant the strongest person being assigned everyone else's. I touched the papers. What if I sign and change my mind? My father leaned back, relieved that I was discussing terms instead of refusing. "Once the papers are signed, the closing happens Monday. After that, it won't matter if you change your mind." He said it gently. That made it worse. I asked whether they had found a buyer. He said an investor was ready to move quickly. "Has the buyer been inside?" Lauren looked up, only to take measurements. She realized what she had admitted and reached for her wine. My mother said Lauren had children while I had a pension and steady benefits. Selling the house was the only fair solution. I asked whether fairness meant taking one person's home to pay for another person's failures. She avoided the question. "Families don't keep score. People who reject scorekeeping often do so after dividing the winnings." I asked Lauren how much her business required. She said she needed less because she had already used deposit funds to reserve an office, hire a brand designer, and order equipment. My father turned toward her. "What deposit funds?" Lauren paused, then called it a bridge loan. I asked whose name was on it. "It's temporary," she said. "Once the house closes, no one loses anything." The notary stopped turning pages. He asked whether I wanted to read the documents alone or call an attorney. My father interrupted. "She's already had enough people confusing her." The notary looked at me. He may not have known the whole plan, but he had ignored enough to join it. I looked at my father. "Did you ever intend to tell me before the house was sold?" "We intended to tell you when you were stable enough to understand." I turned to my mother. "And if I refused treatment?" She folded her hands. "Then we would have asked the court to make the responsible decision." Finally, I faced Lauren. "And you already spent money you expected from my house?" She lifted her chin. I invested against it. That's different. A faint voice reached me through the device beneath my sweater. That's enough. My father pushed the pen across the table. It stopped less than an inch from my fingers. Just sign, honey. We'll take care of everything. I looked at the pen, then at Michael's flag, then at each person sitting around my table. For the first time in weeks, I let my shoulders rise to their natural position. My father did not notice. Lauren did. Her smile disappeared. You were right about one thing, I said. I wasn't thinking clearly. All three of them relaxed. I placed my hand on the case beside my chair, but I did not open it. I had spent 3 weeks letting them mistake my silence for surrender. Now it was time to show them what I had been doing with it. My father mistook the first half of my sentence for surrender. He did not understand the second half until I opened the evidence file. My father mistook the first half of my sentence for surrender. He did not understand the second half until I opened the evidence file. The lock clicked beneath my thumb. I kept believing you were still my family. The relief left his face. I placed the first document beside his wine glass. It revoked the financial power of attorney. The second blocked any sale, loan, or transfer involving my house. Then came the independent evaluation, confirming that I could manage my finances and make my own decisions. I added the bank records, the false guardianship petition, the transfers to Lauren, and a list of dates when documents had been signed in my name while my ship was thousands of miles from Virginia. Would you like to explain how I signed a document in Virginia while my ship was 6,000 miles away? My father stared at the date. My mother called it a misunderstanding. She said paperwork could be confusing. I opened my laptop and played a recording. Her own voice filled the room, explaining how she would manage the house while I stayed at the residential program. The glass in her hand stopped halfway to her mouth. People who build their power on your silence rarely prepare for the moment your silence becomes evidence. They had never feared my anger as much as they feared hearing their own words in a room they could no longer control. My father stood so quickly that his chair struck the wall. Look at her. This is exactly what we warned everyone about. He pointed at the files and called the entire dinner proof of paranoia. Then he turned toward the notary. You're witnessing an episode. She needs help. He pulled out his phone and said he would call emergency services to have me evaluated. He was not worried about my safety. He wanted noise, uniforms, and confusion, anything he could place before a judge. If you cooperate now, we can still keep this private, but if you force us, everyone at the base will know what happened to you. My career and years of service had become another lever he believed he could pull. I did not reach for his phone. Go ahead. Call them. Tell them there are licensed attorneys and federal investigators listening to every word. His thumb stopped above the screen. The notary rose and said he would not witness any signature. My father ordered him to sit down. The man shook his head. You told me she had already agreed. My mother began to cry, but there was no apology in it. Your husband is gone. Lauren has living children who need a future. She said I had a career, a pension, and no children. In her mind, that made my losses reusable. Lauren leaned back. Michael is dead. The house is just sitting there while the rest of us are trying to live. She admitted she planned to use the spare bedroom as her office after I left. When I asked about the folded flag, she rolled her eyes. It was a decoration. I put it back. I turned the laptop toward them and opened the camera footage. Lauren appeared on the screen, lifting the flag with one hand. The cardboard box marked Donate sat beside her. Then her recorded voice crossed the room. Buyers don't need all this military stuff in the photos. No one moved. My parents could no longer call it confusion. Lauren lunged across the table and reached for the laptop. Her chair tipped behind her and struck the floor. I stepped back. You set us up. No, I gave you a table, a pen, and the chance to tell the truth. You brought the rest. Her fingers touched the computer. I think everyone has made their position clear. The knock came immediately. Rachel Kim entered with 3 federal investigators. She told everyone to move away from the documents and leave their phones where they were. My father insisted this was a family disagreement. Rachel looked at the forged records. A family disagreement does not create forged signatures, fraudulent bank transfers, or false court filings. She said investigators had authority to search my parents' home and Lauren's office. Their devices would be collected. The notary would remain and give a statement. My father looked at me as though I had betrayed him. My mother asked whether I truly wanted to destroy the family. Lauren said she had children and could not be arrested. Not one of them asked what their choices had done to me. Accountability feels like betrayal, only to people who believed your love included immunity. Rachel removed a second file from her bag and faced my parents. Before either of you defend your younger daughter again, you should understand that Captain Walsh was not the only identity she used. My father turned toward Lauren. The color left her face. I did not know what was inside that file either. For the first time that night, my parents stopped looking at me as the enemy and started looking at the daughter they had committed crimes to protect. If you are still listening, please leave a comment and tell me how satisfied you are with the story so far. It helps me know that there are still people walking beside me through this journey. Your presence is the greatest encouragement I have as I continue toward the final part. The second file did not contain my name. It contained my father's, my mother's, and debts neither of them knew existed. The second file did not contain my name. It contained my father's, my mother's, and debts neither of them knew existed. Rachel opened it slowly. Inside were credit card applications carrying my parents' signatures. There were 2 business loans, a lease for office space guaranteed in my father's name, and a line of credit opened with my mother's social security number. The confirmation emails had all gone to an address controlled by Lauren. My father stared at the pages. I have never seen these. My mother turned toward my sister. Lauren, what is this? Lauren looked from one face to another, searching for the safest answer. It was temporary. I was going to pay everything back after the house sold. The room became very still. She had just admitted that her plan to repay the debts depended on money from my house. My father asked how much she had borrowed. She did not answer. Rachel did. The total could exceed what my parents still had in their retirement accounts. My mother covered her mouth. Then she said she had already sold jewelry to help Lauren keep the business alive. Lauren's expression hardened. You told me family takes care of family. I had heard that sentence for years. It had always been aimed at me. Now it had turned around and found the people who taught it to her. Favoritism does not teach loyalty. It teaches entitlement. My sister had spent her whole life watching my parents move every boundary for her. Eventually, she stopped believing they had boundaries at all. The searches continued through the night. Later, I learned what investigators found. There were scanned signatures from several family members, copies of driver's licenses, account numbers, an invalid notary stamp, a spreadsheet estimating what my house would sell for and where the money would go. There was a folder with my name on it. Inside were notes about statements that could be used to make me sound unstable, my deployment schedule, the dates when I would be unreachable, the weeks when mail would sit unopened. There was even a list of items in my house with estimated resale values. Another folder carried my parents' names. That one held credit accounts they had never approved. My father tried to recover first. We were manipulated too. He said it as though being deceived by Lauren erased everything he had done. It did not. My parents had signed statements they knew were false. They had brought real estate agents into my home. They had changed the mailing address on my accounts. They knew I had not agreed to sell. They had arranged for me to enter a residential program during the same week they planned to close the sale. I looked at him. Being deceived by her does not erase what you chose to do to me. 2 truths can exist at once. They had been used by my sister, and they had willingly used me. Lauren immediately blamed my father for the guardianship plan. My father said she had prepared the paperwork. My mother insisted she had only signed because she trusted both of them. Each person tried to reduce their own guilt by placing it in someone else's hands. Rachel told them to stop talking to one another. The investigators began collecting phones, laptops, and tablets. Each device was placed into a marked evidence bag. Plastic seals snapped shut across the table where we had eaten dinner only an hour earlier. The sound was small, the meaning was not. The house had become a place where every lie could finally be labeled and carried away. Rachel explained their legal rights in a calm, even voice. My father kept interrupting. My mother cried quietly. Lauren asked whether she could call someone to pick up her children. For a moment, I felt the old reflex return. Fix it. Make the calls. Protect the children. Soften the consequences. Then I remembered what Maya had told me. Witnessing harm did not make me responsible for rescuing the people who caused it. The children would be cared for. That did not require me to protect their mother from the law. As the investigators led my family toward the front door, my father turned back. Aaron, are you really going to let them do this to us? It was the first time that night he used my name. Not honey. Not sweetheart. Not she, as though I were absent from my own home. My name. For 1 second, I saw fear in his face. I also saw the expectation beneath it. Even now, he believed I would become the strong daughter again, the one who stepped forward when everyone else had created a disaster. I did not move. They are not doing this to you. They are documenting what you did. The door closed behind them. By morning, the house was quiet again. But quiet after a raid does not feel like peace. It feels like standing inside the shell of a life you no longer recognize. By morning, the house was quiet again. But quiet after a raid does not feel like peace. It feels like standing inside the shell of a life you no longer recognize. I sat alone at the dining table. The wine glasses were still there. The plates had been cleared, but faint circles remained on the wood where people had set down their drinks. The evidence was gone, sealed and carried away. Michael's flag still rested above the fireplace. I had imagined that moment for weeks. I thought truth would feel like relief. Instead, I felt empty. In one night, every suspicion had become fact. My sister had used us. My parents had used me. And each of them had chosen the story that made their own behavior easier to live with. 2 days later, I met with the prosecutor. She spoke plainly. Bank fraud and identity theft were not private family matters. False filings had involved a court. The loan application had involved a lender. The forged signatures had affected people beyond me. I could explain what I wanted. I could describe the damage. I could ask for repayment and civil protection. I could not order the state to pretend nothing had happened. Forgiveness is personal. Prosecution is public. I could decide what I carried in my heart, but I could not decide that banks, courts, and other victims had not been harmed. The evidence divided responsibility clearly. Lauren had created false accounts, controlled the email addresses, moved money, borrowed under several names, and committed funds from a house she did not own. My father had used a document he knew was questionable. He had signed false statements, worked with the buyer, and threatened to use my mental health against my career. My mother had watched my mail, arranged the residential evaluation, supported the guardianship request, and known that money from the house would go to Lauren. The notary had not created the plan. He had simply ignored one warning after another. Once investigators questioned him, he cooperated. He also faced professional consequences for what he had chosen not to ask. For a long time, I had believed guilt had to belong to one person at a time. That was another habit my family had taught me. Someone was always the victim. Someone else was always responsible. Real life is rarely that clean. Lauren had led much of the scheme. My parents had still chosen to participate. The notary had looked away. Each decision had made the next one easier. The children were the only people I wanted protected from all of it. Their father had been living separately from Lauren. When he was contacted, he agreed to take primary care of them while the case moved forward. I did not tell the children their mother was a monster. I did not ask them to understand adult crimes. I helped make sure they stayed in the same school, had access to counseling, and were never asked to choose which side of the family they loved. Children should not have to carry evidence inside their loyalty. The prosecutor later explained the possible agreements. Lauren faced the most serious consequences because of the number of accounts, the forged documents, and the way she had organized the fraud. My parents were offered less severe terms if they admitted what they had done, repaid what they could, withdrew every guardianship claim, gave up any interest in my house, and accepted a no-contact order. They did not lose money because I demanded their ruin. They lost it through debt, legal fees, repayment, and the choices they had already made. When it was time for my statement, I did not call them evil. I did not describe them as monsters. I said they used grief as evidence, concern as camouflage, and family as permission. My voice stayed steady. I did not ask for the maximum punishment. I also did not ask the court to excuse them. Mercy without a boundary would only teach them that I could still be used to escape consequences. That sentence cost me more than the others. The old part of me still wanted to soften the landing. It wanted to be the reasonable daughter, the capable sister, the one who could absorb damage without making anyone uncomfortable. But kindness is not the same as rescue. Dignity is not proven by how completely you can destroy the people who hurt you. Sometimes it is proven by knowing when justice is enough. The court accepted the agreements. The false filings were withdrawn, the sale was cancelled, the money that could be recovered began moving back through the proper channels. My house was mine again. On paper, that should have been the end. It was not. Winning the case stopped them from taking my house. It did not teach me how to feel safe inside it again. Winning the case stopped them from taking my house. It did not teach me how to feel safe inside it again. The first thing I changed was the locks. Every door, every code, every spare key. The locksmith worked quietly while I stood in the hallway, listening to metal turn inside the old hardware. When he finished, I deleted the garage code, reset the alarm, and wrote down every person who had ever been given access. The list was longer than I expected. For the first few weeks, every small sound pulled me out of sleep. The refrigerator settling, a branch brushing the siding, the soft click of the heat turning on. I would lie still and listen, convinced someone had entered. Nothing had been taken that night, not in the ordinary sense, but the house had been handled by people who believed they already owned it. Chairs had been moved, small pencil marks from the staging company remained behind a bookcase. A framed photograph had been shifted 2 inches to the left. In the garage, the cardboard box marked "Donate Still" sat near the wall. I left it there for several days. I was not ready to touch it. A burglary steals objects. Financial abuse steals familiarity. It makes you question every key, every signature, every person who once knew where you kept the spare. Maya helped me rebuild the financial side of my life with the same patience I was trying to bring back into the house. We created a trust to hold the property and my investments. We added several layers of identity verification. Any major change required confirmation through more than one channel. I chose a backup decision maker who was not part of my immediate family. Then we wrote clear instructions for a future I hoped would never come. If I ever truly lost the ability to make decisions, the people helping me would have rules to follow. They would not be allowed to treat inconvenience as incapacity or grief as consent. That part mattered to me. I was not building the system because I expected everyone to betray me. I was building it because kindness should never depend on trust alone. The education fund for the children came next. It was managed independently. Lauren could not borrow from it, redirect it, or use it as collateral. The money would be available for school when they were old enough. The rest of my estate would eventually support military families. For years, my generosity had been treated like an open account. Now it had structure. Structure did not make it less generous. It made sure the right people received it. The children visited one Sunday with their father. My niece stood in front of the fireplace and looked up at Michael's flag. It was now protected inside a glass case. "Why is it in there?" she asked. I told her the flag had been given to me after Michael died. I said it represented his service and the life we had shared. I did not tell her what her mother had done with it. Children deserve the truth, but they do not need every detail before they are ready to carry it. She looked at me for a long moment. "Are we still your family?" The question hurt in a different way than the others had. You never stopped being my family. Her shoulders relaxed. Family is not decided by who shares your blood when things are easy. It is revealed by who protects your dignity when protecting it costs them something. The children had done nothing wrong. I could close the door to the adults who harmed me without making the children stand outside with them. After they left, I walked through the house and realized I had been preserving every room exactly as Michael had known it. For years, that had felt like loyalty. Now it felt a little like fear. I turned the spare room into a reading room. I donated furniture I no longer needed because I chose to, not because someone wanted a cleaner photograph. I kept Michael's mug, the folded flag, and a few photographs that still made the room feel warm. The rest I allowed to change. Healing did not mean erasing him. It meant letting the house hold more than one ending. Slowly, the place became mine again, not because every memory was repaired, but because every new decision came from me. For almost a year, the no-contact order gave me silence. Then, 3 days before its review date, my father left a voicemail asking for 5 minutes. For almost a year, the no-contact order gave me silence. Then, 3 days before its review date, my father left a voicemail asking for 5 minutes. The notification appeared while I was washing a coffee mug at the kitchen sink. "Aaron, please, just give me 5 minutes. I'm not asking for money." I read the transcript twice. That last sentence stayed with me. He still understood our relationship through money. Even when he claimed not to want any, he seemed to think the absence of a request should make the rest of his message safe. I did not play it. Later that afternoon, Maya called. My mother had mailed a letter to her office because the order still prevented direct contact. The envelope was thin. My name was written in my mother's careful handwriting. She apologized for what she called everything getting out of control. She wrote that Lauren had deceived them. She reminded me that my father was getting older. Near the end, she asked me not to let one mistake destroy an entire family. I read the letter once, then again. What she did not write mattered more than what she did. She did not say she had lied about my mental health. She did not say she had tried to take away my right to make decisions. She did not say she had placed Lauren's needs above my dignity. An apology that avoids naming the harm is often a request for access, not an act of accountability. Still, guilt found me. It arrived quietly, the way it always had, not as a clear belief that I owed them something, but as a pressure behind my ribs. A familiar thought whispered that maybe I was being too hard, maybe 5 minutes was harmless, maybe refusing to listen made me cold. I called Helen. I told her about the voicemail and the letter. Then I asked whether refusing to meet them meant I had become cruel. She did not answer right away. "Do you want to see them?" she asked. "Or do you want to stop feeling guilty for not wanting to?" The question settled into the room. For most of my life, guilt had been used like a family alarm. The moment I stepped away from the role they gave me, it went off. Good daughter, strong sister. The one who understood, the one who fixed things. I realized I was not longing to see my parents. I was longing to stop feeling like a bad person for protecting myself. The next morning, I finally played the beginning of my father's voicemail. We made mistakes, but Lauren was the one who planned most of it. There it was. The apology had already become an argument. Then he said my mother was not handling things well. He reminded me that I had always been the strong one. I stopped the message. He was asking me to return to the same position I had occupied before. Because I was strong, I should carry their fear. Because I was capable, I should manage their regret. Because I had survived what they did, I should now help them survive the consequences. I did not delete the voicemail. Anger would have made that easy. Instead, I saved it to the closed case folder Maya kept for me. I did not respond. On her advice, I allowed the no contact order to continue. I did not promise myself that I would never forgive them. Forever is too large a decision to make while healing, but forgiveness, if it ever came, would not automatically include access. A boundary is not revenge. Revenge follows someone to make them hurt. A boundary simply stops opening the door. For the first time, silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt chosen. I understood that I did not need my parents to name what they had done correctly. Their refusal to do so did not make my memory less accurate. I no longer needed an apology to confirm that I had been harmed. And I no longer needed guilt to tell me who deserved a place in my life. That evening, I put my phone face down on the table and finished my coffee while it was still warm. The next morning, I drove back to the base coffee shop with the same debit card in my wallet and my father's unanswered message still on my phone. The next morning, I drove back to the base coffee shop with the same debit card in my wallet and my father's unanswered message still on my phone. Norfolk was cool and bright. A light wind carried the smell of salt from the water. I wore my uniform because it was a work day. Inside, the coffee shop looked almost exactly as it had a year earlier. The espresso machine hissed, shoes crossed the tile, someone near the pickup area called out a name and lifted a paper cup. I stepped forward. Black coffee, small. The cashier entered the order. $4.50. I pulled out the same debit card that had been declined the morning everything began. The edges were worn now. For a second, I held it between my fingers and remembered standing in that same spot, tired from deployment and embarrassed by a machine that seemed to know my life was no longer under my control. I tapped the card against the reader. A soft beep followed. Approved. Nothing dramatic happened. No one applauded. The cashier did not know why I looked at the screen for an extra second. She handed me the cup. Have a good morning, Captain. You too. A year earlier, I thought the humiliation was not being able to buy coffee. I understand now that the real humiliation was being forced to ask permission to exist inside a life I had built. The approval meant more than money had returned to my account. My phone number belonged to me again. My house was no longer for sale. No one could decide how much I was allowed to spend. No one could use grief as proof that I had lost the right to choose. Financial independence gives you choices. Emotional independence allows you to keep them. I carried the coffee outside. My phone lit up inside my hand. My father's voicemail was still there. I had never played the rest of it. For a moment, I remembered the morning of the searches, 57 missed calls. His words had moved from orders to panic because the consequences were no longer under his control. He had not called to ask whether I was safe. He had called because he wanted me to stop what was happening. Those 57 calls had sounded like panic. At the time, part of me mistook panic for remorse. They are not the same thing. Remorse names the harm. Panic only fears the outcome. I moved the voicemail into the archived folder connected to the closed case. I did not delete it. I did not call back. I was not running from the past. I was refusing to let it decide how my morning would begin. From the coffee shop, I walked toward the waterfront. The engines of the ship sounded in the distance. Years earlier, that low vibration had meant long nights and months away from home. Now it sounded familiar. Steady. Part of a world where duty still had meaning. The air smelled of salt and fuel. I thought about Michael. I thought about the children, and the way my niece had relaxed when I told her she had never stopped being family. I thought about Helen, who taught me the difference between guilt and love. I thought about Nathan, Maya, Rachel, and the people who trusted the evidence without asking me to become less wounded before they believed me. Family is not limited to the people who carry your name. Sometimes family is the person who protects your dignity when doing so is inconvenient. Sometimes it is the person who tells you the truth without trying to own your choices. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is the discipline to observe, preserve the evidence, and wait until the truth can no longer be interrupted. I did not win because I had rank, money, or federal agents at my door. I won because I stopped giving people who lied about me the power to define my reaction. I did not shame my parents in public. I did not take their property. I did not teach the children to hate their mother. I did not ask the law to hurt anyone beyond what accountability required. I kept records. I asked for help. I protected my home. I spoke when the truth was ready. Then I walked away from a relationship that no longer contained respect. For most of my life, I believed being the strong one meant carrying everyone. Now I know strength also means knowing what was never yours to carry. I took the first sip of coffee. It was hot, plain, and exactly what I had ordered. Then I continued toward the pier, where the workday was beginning. The coffee was hot, the card was mine, and so was the life waiting beyond that door. Were you satisfied with the way I handled my family, or do you believe I should have asked for the maximum punishment? Rate this ending from 1 to 10 in the comments and tell me whether you would have walked away or given them one final chance. Your answer may help someone else realize that protecting their dignity is not the same as seeking revenge. What do you think about her decision? Would you have done anything differently if you were in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. If this story gave you something to think about, please leave a like, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe so you do not miss the stories still to come. I will see you in the next story. This is Honor Family Radio, where we use stories to walk with you through the years, helping you find peace, courage, and strength within yourself.